The sound of crystal shattering on marble is louder than you'd think. One moment I was holding a Baccarat champagne flute, the next it was exploding across Cordelia Ashworth's pristine white marble floor in 1,000 glittering pieces. The conversation in the dining room stopped mid-sentence. 18 people turned to stare at me. 18 people in designer clothing sitting at a table that cost more than my first car, all looking at the girl who couldn't even hold a glass properly. Cordelia's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. Well, I suppose we can't expect someone from your background to know how to handle fine crystal. The laughter started small. A chuckle from Sienna, Julian's sister. A polite cough that was definitely hiding a smile from one of the country club friends. Then it spread around the table like a virus until everyone was laughing at me. Everyone except Aunt Petra, who just looked sad, and Julian, my fiancé, who squeezed my hand under the table. Not in solidarity. In warning. The squeeze said, "Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me. Don't prove them right about you." I looked down at the shattered glass. Each piece caught the light from the chandelier above, throwing tiny rainbows across the floor. Beautiful, even in destruction. I wondered if that's what I looked like to them. Something broken that still somehow managed to sparkle. "I'm so sorry," I said quietly, exactly the way they expected me to. Meek, apologetic, small. "It's quite all right," Cordelia said in that tone that meant it absolutely was not all right. "Maria can clean it up in the morning. Let's not let it ruin our lovely dinner." She said lovely the way other people say tolerable. She'd been saying everything that way since I'd arrived 6 months ago. "My name is Lena Kovac. I'm 32 years old. And until about 4 minutes ago, I was trying very hard to become Lena Ashworth. Trying to fit into this family like a square peg in a round hole, sanding down all my edges until I could slip through unnoticed. Trying to be good enough for a man who watched his mother hand me dirty dishes and said nothing. Trying to believe that love meant patience and understanding, not standing up for the person you claimed to cherish. But sitting there on that October evening, surrounded by people who measured my worth in salad forks and summer homes, something inside me finally cracked. Not broke. I'd had too much practice for that. But cracked like ice on a lake right before it gives way. And underneath that ice was something they had no idea existed. Something cold and patient and very, very prepared. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. Because you need to understand that this isn't a story about a girl who got lucky or got revenge on a whim. This is a story about documentation, patience, and the exact moment you realize that the people who treat you like you're worthless have absolutely no idea what you're worth. I met Julian Ashworth III 6 months earlier at a gallery opening in Manhattan. I'd gone because one of my colleagues at work was dating the artist and needed moral support. I was standing in front of a painting I didn't particularly understand, pretending to appreciate the brushwork, when a voice behind me said, "I think it's supposed to be a deconstructed representation of late-stage capitalism. But honestly, it just looks like someone spilled paint and called it art." I turned around and there he was. Tall, well-dressed in that effortless way that comes from having money so long you forget it exists, with dark hair and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We started talking. He was charming, self-deprecating about his family's architecture firm, about the pressure of living up to the Ashworth name, about wanting to design affordable housing instead of mansions for billionaires. He asked what I did. I said property management. Technically true. He nodded and said that sounded interesting, and I could see in his eyes that he was making assumptions. Apartment buildings, probably. Residential complexes. Maybe some small commercial properties. Something modest. Something appropriate for a girl with a Slavic last name wearing a dress from Nordstrom Rack. I let him assume. My grandmother used to tell me, "Never show all your cards, Lena. Let them tell you who they are before you decide what they deserve to know." Grandma escaped Yugoslavia with nothing but the clothes on her back and a coffee can full of photographs. She cleaned houses in America for 40 years and saved every penny. She taught me that silence is often the smartest thing you can say. So I didn't correct Julian's assumptions. I didn't tell him that I was the senior vice president of acquisitions for Apex Holdings, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed luxury real estate. I didn't mention that I managed a portfolio worth $340 million. dollars. I didn't say that my base salary was $680,000 a year, not counting bonuses and equity. I didn't explain that I'd worked my way up from a filing clerk position at a property management company, putting myself through business school at night, earning my MBA from Wharton, and building a reputation in the industry as someone who could spot a troubled property from 3 financial quarters away. I just smiled and said property management sounded more boring than it actually was, and he laughed, and we talked about art and architecture and the weather, and by the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. Nothing too fancy, which I appreciated. Julian talked about his work at Ashworth Architecture, the family firm his father had built from his grandfather's practice. He talked about the pressure of being the only son, of carrying forward a legacy that went back 3 generations. He talked about wanting to do something meaningful with his career, not just design vacation homes for hedge fund managers. I found myself liking him, really liking him. He seemed different from the finance guys I usually met at industry events. Guys who measured everything in quarterly returns and talked about real estate like it was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Julian talked about buildings like they were living things, like they mattered. We dated for 3 months before he invited me to meet his family. 3 months of dinners and gallery walks and lazy Sunday mornings. 3 months of falling for the man he presented himself as. The man who claimed he wanted something real, something authentic, something that wasn't about money or status or the right connections. I should have known better. My grandmother used to say, the mask always slips eventually. The question is whether you're paying attention when it does. The first family dinner was on a Sunday in April. Julian picked me up from my apartment in Murray Hill, a nice one-bedroom that I'd bought outright 3 years ago. Not flashy, not drawing attention, just comfortable. He'd never asked how I could afford it on a property manager's salary. That should have been my first clue. We drove to Greenwich, Connecticut. 45 minutes of Julian coaching me on his family. Mom can be a little particular about etiquette. Dad's obsessed with the firm. My sister Sienna just got back from Monaco, so she'll probably talk about that for 3 hours. Just be yourself. They'll love you. Be yourself. Unless yourself isn't good enough, then be smaller, quieter, more apologetic. That's what he really meant. I just didn't know it yet. The Ashworth estate appeared at the end of a long private drive. 12,000 square feet of Georgian Revival architecture, sitting on 2 perfectly manicured acres. Red brick, white columns, symmetrical windows that caught the afternoon sun. It was beautiful. It was also immediately familiar. I'd seen this property before. 2 years earlier, in a quarterly review of distressed luxury properties in the Northeast Corridor. It had pinged our acquisition algorithm because the owners had refinanced twice in 3 years. Not unusual by itself, but combined with property tax delays and some concerning debt-to-value ratios, it was worth flagging. We'd passed on it at the time. The market for properties this size was soft, and the numbers didn't justify the risk. Looking at it now, I realized the numbers had probably gotten worse. Cordelia Ashworth met us at the door. She was exactly what I expected. Early 60s, expertly maintained in that way that money enables. Blonde hair that might or might not be her original color, styled in a perfect bob. Cashmere sweater set, despite it being 70 degrees outside. Pearls. Of course, pearls. Julian, darling. She kissed him on both cheeks. Then she turned to me. And you must be Lena. How quaint. Quaint. That was her first word to me. Not nice, too. Meet you or welcome. Or Julian's told me so much about you. Quaint. Like I was a curiosity. A novelty. Something to be observed and categorized. She didn't shake my hand. I've just had my nails done. Julian said nothing, just smiled and ushered me inside. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from old money, desperately trying to look like old money. Antique furniture that was probably authentic. Oil paintings of ancestors who looked vaguely disappointed with their descendants. a grand staircase that belonged in a movie about British aristocracy. Everything was immaculate. Everything was expensive. Everything screamed, "We have always had this and you have not." Dominic Ashworth was in the study, reviewing blueprints. He was a larger version of Julian. Same dark hair, now graying at the temples. Same build. But where Julian had warmth in his eyes, Dominic had assessment. He looked at me the way you'd look at a piece of furniture you were considering buying, measuring value, calculating worth. "So you're the young lady Julian's been telling us about." He shook my hand, firm and brief. "He says you're in property management." "Yes, sir." "Interesting field. Lots of headaches, I'd imagine. Tenants not paying rent, maintenance issues, that sort of thing." "It has its challenges," I said neutrally. "Well, if you ever want to learn about the real estate business, the meaningful side of it, you should come by the firm. Architecture is where the real value gets created. Property management is just maintenance." I smiled politely. Didn't mention that I'd reviewed the financials on Ashworth Architecture as part of a broader market analysis last year. Didn't mention that they were underperforming their regional competitors by 30%. Didn't mention that Dominic had personally guaranteed loans that were becoming problematic. "That's very kind of you to offer," I said instead. Sienna arrived an hour later with her husband Blake, who worked in finance and spent the entire evening on his phone. Sienna was a younger, sharper version of Cordelia. Same bone structure, same wardrobe, same way of looking at people like they were specimens under glass. Dinner was in the formal dining room. 18 seats around a table that looked like it had been imported from a French chateau. I was placed between Julian and Aunt Petra, who, I later learned, was Dominic's estranged sister. The interrogation started with the appetizer. "So, Lena, where did you grow up?" Cordelia asked, in that tone that meant she already knew the answer and was testing whether I'd lie. "Queens," I said. "Oh, how urban." "Where did you go to school?" Sienna asked. "Queens College for undergrad." "I'm not familiar with that one. Is it a community college?" "It's part of the CUNY system." "Ah, how economical." "And your parents, what do they do?" Dominic asked. My father had been a maintenance supervisor. He died when I was 19, 2 months before I started college. My mother had cleaned houses alongside my grandmother until she died 3 years later. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, "My father passed away when I was young. My mother worked in domestic services." The table went quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then Cordelia said, "Well, that must have been difficult," in a tone that suggested she'd never experienced difficulty in her entire life. The rest of dinner was a master class in passive-aggressive cruelty disguised as polite conversation. Every question was a trap. Every comment was a judgment. They asked where I'd summered as a child. I said I'd worked at my mother's house cleaning business. They asked if I'd studied abroad. I said I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for college and didn't have time. They asked about my family's estate planning. I said my grandmother left me some money when she died, which was true, though I didn't mention it was $340,000 that I'd invested carefully and turned into significantly more. Through it all, Julian sat beside me, smiling, nodding, saying nothing. Not when his mother made a comment about knowing one's place in society. Not when his sister asked if I'd ever been to a proper restaurant before. Not when his father suggested I might want to take some etiquette classes to polish up the rough edges. If you've enjoyed the story so far, make sure you're still with me for this next part. And hey, if you want to see more stories like this, drop a like to let me know you're in my corner. The only person who showed me any kindness was Aunt Petra. She was in her late 60s, dressed simply compared to the rest of the family, and she had this way of looking at people like she could see straight through their performance to who they really were. After dinner, Cordelia sent all the men to the study for brandy and cigars, like we were living in a period drama. The women moved to the sitting room. That's when Cordelia turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lena, dear, would you mind helping me clear the table? Maria has the evening off and I could use an extra pair of hands." I looked at Sienna, who was scrolling through her phone, at Petra, who was watching me carefully, at Cordelia, who was holding out a stack of dirty plates like it was the most natural thing in the world to ask a dinner guest to clean up. This was a test. I knew it was a test. If I refused, I'd be difficult, ungrateful, too proud. If I accepted, I'd establish my place in the hierarchy, below them, useful for manual labor. I took the plates. Julian saw me carrying dishes through the hallway. Our eyes met. I waited for him to say something, to tell his mother that I was a guest, not the help, to stand up for me. He looked away. I carried the plates to the kitchen. It was enormous, professionally equipped, the kind of kitchen that appeared in magazine spreads. And standing at the sink, already washing dishes, was Aunt Petra. "You don't have to do this," I said. "Neither do you," Petra replied. "But we both know what happens if we don't." We washed dishes in silence for a few minutes. Then Petra said, "She did this to me, too. My first dinner here, 37 years ago. I'd just married Dominic's brother. I showed up in my best dress, excited to be part of the family. Cordelia handed me a mop and told me the floor needed cleaning. What did you do?" "I cleaned the floor. I was young. I wanted them to like me." She handed me a plate to dry. Took me 15 years to realize they were never going to like me. I married a plumber. I didn't come from money. In their eyes, I'd always be the help who got above her station. How did you handle it? I stopped coming to dinners, built my own life with my husband. We were happy, still are. He retired 5 years ago. We travel now, see the world. She smiled. Turns out happiness doesn't require anyone's approval but your own. I dried the plate carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because you have that look. The one my mother had. The one I learned to have. The look that says you've counted every penny you've ever earned. You know exactly what things cost. Not just money. Everything. Time. Dignity. Self-respect. She turned to look at me directly. You're tougher than you look, and smarter. I can tell. The question is whether you're smart enough to leave before they break you. Julian loves me, I said. Maybe, but does he love you enough to choose you over them? Because that's what it's going to come down to. And based on what I saw tonight, I know which side he'll land on. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend him. But I couldn't. Because everything Petra said was true. We finished the dishes. When we returned to the sitting room, Cordelia was showing Sienna fabric samples for a chair she was having reupholstered. They didn't acknowledge that we'd been gone for 45 minutes doing their work. The drive home was quiet. Julian finally spoke when we were halfway back to the city. I think that went well. I stared at him. You think that went well? They're tough at first, but they'll warm up to you. You just have to give them time. Your mother handed me dirty dishes, Julian. She treated me like the help. She was just asking for help. Maria wasn't there. Why didn't she ask Sienna? Why didn't she ask you? You know why she asked me, and you said nothing. Lena, please. You're making this into something it's not. My mother was just trying to get to know you. That's how she is. She tests people. And I failed, apparently. You didn't fail. You're just being sensitive. Sensitive. That word men use when they don't want to acknowledge that something they allowed was wrong. I looked out the window at the lights of the city appearing in the distance. My city. The place I'd built my life. The place where I was respected and successful and valued. I need to think about whether I want to do this again, I said, quietly. Do what? Spend time with your family. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They're going to be your family too, eventually. Are they? What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not sure I want to marry into a family that treats me like I'm beneath them. It means I'm not sure I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm good enough for people who've already decided I'm not. You're being dramatic. There it was. Dramatic. The word that dismisses women's legitimate feelings. Maybe I am, I said. Or maybe I'm finally being realistic. We didn't talk the rest of the drive. When he dropped me off at my apartment, he tried to kiss me. I turned my head. He got the cheek. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. But I knew something had fundamentally changed. Not in him. He was exactly who he'd always been. I just hadn't been paying close enough attention. The change was in me. In my willingness to accept being diminished. In my belief that love should require me to be smaller. My grandmother used to say, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. The Ashworths had shown me exactly who they were. The question was whether I was going to believe them. I didn't call Julian the next day, or the day after that. I threw myself into work, which was easy because I was in the middle of closing a major acquisition in Boston. A historic property that had been mismanaged into near bankruptcy. We were buying it for 63 cents on the dollar, renovating it, and would flip it within 18 months for a 32% return. This was what I was good at. Numbers, analysis, seeing the truth beneath the surface. On the third day, Julian showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with my team when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. "There's a Julian Ashworth here to see you. He says it's urgent." My colleague Yuki raised an eyebrow. "The boyfriend?" "Something like that." "Want me to tell him you're busy?" Considered it, then decided I'd rather deal with this now. "Give me 5 minutes." I found Julian in the lobby, looking uncomfortable. He'd never been to my office before, never asked to see where I worked. Another thing I should have paid more attention to. "Lena, I'm sorry to just show up, but you haven't been answering my calls." "I've been busy. We're closing a deal." He looked around the lobby. Apex Holdings wasn't flashy, but it was clearly expensive. Glass and steel and modern art, the kind of space that costs serious money to lease in Manhattan. "This is where you work." "It's nice. Really nice. I didn't realize property management companies had offices like this." I could have corrected him right then, could have explained what I actually did, but I was curious to see how long he'd stay interested if he thought I was still just a girl who managed apartment buildings. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm in the middle of a workday, Julian." "Tonight then. Dinner, please." I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see if he'd apologize, if he'd acknowledge what his family had done, if he'd admit that his silence was a choice. We met at the same Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. Some kind of symbolic gesture on his part, I assumed. He ordered wine, expensive wine. Then he launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "I know my family can be difficult. I know they didn't make the best first impression. But you have to understand, they're protective. They've seen me date women who were only interested in the Ashworth name. The money, the connections. They're just being careful." "Is that what you think? That they were vetting me to make sure I wasn't a gold digger? Isn't that reasonable?" I laughed. Actually laughed. "Julian, your mother handed me dishes. Your sister made fun of where I went to college. Your father suggested I needed etiquette classes. That's not vetting, that's class warfare." "You're exaggerating." Am I? You were there. You saw everything. You heard everything. What did you do about it?" "Exactly. You did nothing. You chose them over me, over basic human decency." "That's not fair." "What's not fair is expecting me to endure being treated like hired help because you're too afraid to stand up to your mother." His face hardened. "My family is important to me. I'm not asking you to choose between your family and me. I'm asking you to defend me when they're cruel. There's a difference." "They weren't cruel. They were just being themselves." "And if being themselves includes humiliating your girlfriend, that's acceptable to you?" "I think you're being too sensitive about this." There was that word again. Sensitive. I set down my wine glass. "I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. If I told you right now that I couldn't do this anymore, that I couldn't subject myself to your family's judgment and your silence, would you fight for me? Would you choose me?" He hesitated, just for a second. But that second told me everything I needed to know. "It's not about choosing," he finally said. "It's about finding a way to make everyone happy." "You can't make everyone happy, Julian. Sometimes you have to decide who matters most. And you just told me it's not me." "That's not what I said." "It's what you didn't say." I stood up, left money on the table for my half of the meal, walked out. He called 17 times that night. I didn't answer. By morning, there were texts, apologies, promises to do better, claims that he'd talk to his family, that things would change. I didn't believe him. But I was curious about something. So I did what I always do when I need information. I investigated. I started with public records. property records, business filings, tax liens, all publicly available information. Nothing illegal, nothing shady, just research. The Ashworth estate had 3 mortgages on it. The first was the original loan from when they'd bought the property 22 years ago, $400,000. Reasonable. The second mortgage was taken out 6 years ago, $350,000. Used to renovate the kitchen and add a pool house, according to the permits I found. The third mortgage was taken out 2 years ago, another $350,000. No permits filed. No obvious improvements made to the property. That money had gone somewhere else. Total owed on the house, $1.1 million? Current market value for a property that size in Greenwich, maybe $850,000 on a good day. The market for massive estates had collapsed during the pandemic and never fully recovered. They were underwater by at least $250,000, but that was just the house. I dug deeper into Ashworth architecture. Corporate tax filings showed declining revenue for 5 consecutive years. They'd laid off 12 employees over the past 3 years. They had outstanding debts to vendors, totaling $120,000. Back taxes of $85,000. A line of credit maxed out at $200,000. The firm that Julian was so proud of, the family legacy that went back 3 generations, was hemorrhaging money. And then I found something interesting. 8 months ago, Dominic had quietly listed the estate for sale. He'd pulled it after 2 weeks when the only offer that came in was for $600,000, far too little to cover the mortgages. The listing had been taken down, but I found it cached on a real estate archive site. The Ashworths were in serious financial trouble, and they were desperate to hide it. I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, looking at the financial picture of a family that had spent 6 months making me feel worthless. A family that measured people's value in country club memberships and European vacations. A family that was quietly drowning in debt while maintaining a facade of aristocratic superiority. The irony was almost poetic. My phone buzzed. Julian again. This time with a text. Please, can we talk? I miss you. I'll do better. I promise. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me, the part that had fallen for his smile and his charm and his promises, wanted to believe him. Wanted to give him another chance. Wanted to think that love could overcome his family's cruelty and his own cowardice. But the part of me that had built a career on reading numbers and spotting lies knew better. Julian wasn't going to change. His family wasn't going to accept me, and I was never going to be good enough in their eyes, no matter what I did or who I became, unless they knew the truth. Let me know you're watching by dropping a like. It's a small gesture that makes a massive difference for the channel. I picked up my phone and called Yuki. She answered on the second ring. It's 10 o'clock at night. This better be good. Remember that. Property in Greenwich I flagged 2 years ago, the Ashworth estate? Vaguely, we passed on it. Market was too soft for that size. It's gotten worse. They're carrying $1.1 million in mortgages on a property worth maybe $850. They're behind on business debts. The architecture firm is failing. Okay, so I'm dating the son. Was dating. It's complicated. Silence, then, oh, Lena, please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I'm thinking about justice. Justice or revenge? Is there a difference? Usually, yes. In this case, I'm honestly not sure. I could hear her moving around, probably making tea. She always made tea when she was thinking. Walk me through this. So I did. I told her about the dinners and the dishes and the casual cruelty. About Julian's silence and his family's contempt. About Aunt Petra washing dishes and warning me to leave. About everything that had happened over the past 6 months. When I finished, Yuki was quiet for a long moment. They treated you like hired help? Yes. While you were there as a guest, as the son's girlfriend? Yes. And he said nothing? Nothing. Lena, I'm going to say something as your friend, not your colleague. You should walk away. Block his number. Never see these people again. They're not worth your time or energy. I know. But you're not going to do that, are you? No. Because? Because they need to understand that their cruelty has consequences. Because they need to learn that the people they look down on might be the same people who hold their future in their hands. Because I'm tired of watching wealthy, arrogant people treat others like garbage and face no repercussions. Yuki sighed. You sound like your grandmother. My grandmother was the smartest person I ever knew. Fair point. So what are you thinking? I looked at the financial documents spread across my coffee table. The bank is going to call those mortgages eventually. When they do, they'll sell the note to the highest bidder. What if that bidder was us? You want Apex to buy the Ashworth mortgage? Through a shell company, something that doesn't trace back to me directly. We buy the debt, not the property. Then we offer them a choice. Sell to us at a reasonable price or face public foreclosure. That's aggressive. That's business. It's also personal. Can it be both? Yuki was quiet again. Then she said, You'd need approval from the partners. This is a small acquisition, but it's also potentially complicated if your relationship to the family becomes public. I'll present it as a standard distressed asset acquisition, which it is. The personal connection is irrelevant to the business case. Is it, though? The numbers work with or without my feelings about them. The property is undervalued. The debt is purchasable. We can acquire it below market, offer them a fair exit, and either flip it quickly or hold it for rental income. It's a sound investment. You've already run the analysis, haven't you? I looked at my laptop screen where I'd spent the past 3 hours building a financial model. Maybe. Lena, the IRR is 34% over 18 months. Comparable properties in the area are selling for $7 to $9 million after renovation. We could acquire the debt for maybe $3 million, offer them $4.5 to cover their obligations and avoid foreclosure, renovate for $800,000, and sell for $7.5 to $8. Clear profit of $2 to $3 million. You've definitely already run the analysis. It's a good deal, Yuki. It's a revenge plot with a spreadsheet attached. Those are my favorite kind. She laughed despite herself. Okay, fine. I'll help you put together a presentation for the partners, but you need to be honest with yourself about why you're doing this. I am being honest. They deserve this. Maybe, but make sure you're not destroying your own peace in the process of teaching them a lesson. I won't. Promise me that if this starts affecting your mental health or your career, you'll walk away. I promise. I don't believe you, but I appreciate the sentiment. Send me everything you have. I'll start building the acquisition model. We hung up. I sat in my apartment for another hour, looking at the financial ruins of a family that had spent months making me feel small, a family that measured worth in lineage and looked down on people who actually earned what they had. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Julian. I love you. Please don't give up on us. I typed back. I need some time to think. I'll call you when I'm ready. What I didn't tell him was that while I was thinking, I was also planning. And by the time I was done thinking, his family's perfect facade would be shattered as thoroughly as that baccarat crystal on his mother's marble floor. 3 weeks later, I met with the partners at Apex Holdings. My presentation was straightforward. A distressed luxury property in Greenwich, Connecticut, with significant acquisition potential. I walked them through the numbers, the market analysis, the comparable sales. I didn't mention that I'd been dating the owner's son. That detail felt irrelevant to the business case. The partners approved the acquisition with minimal discussion. It was exactly the type of deal we specialized in. Small enough to move quickly, large enough to generate meaningful returns. We set up a shell company called Meridian Property Trust, LLC. My name appeared nowhere in the public filings. Just a standard corporate structure designed to hold the asset until we decided to sell or develop it. Then we waited. In real estate, patience is as important as capital. You have to wait for the right moment. The moment when the seller is desperate enough to accept your terms, but not so desperate that they'll accept anyone's terms. Meanwhile, Julian kept calling, kept texting, kept showing up at places he thought I'd be. After 2 weeks, I finally agreed to see him. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown, neutral territory. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. I've missed you, he said. I've been busy with work. Too busy to return a text? I needed space, Julian. I told you that. How much space do you need? It's been 3 weeks. I'm still figuring that out. He reached across the table and took my hand. I love you, Lena. I know I messed up. I know I should have defended you better. I'm sorry. I've talked to my family. I told them they need to treat you with more respect. You talk to them. Yes, I made it clear that if they want me in their lives, they need to accept you. And what did they say? He hesitated, just for a moment. They said they'd try harder. They'd try harder. Not that they were sorry. Not that they recognized their behavior was cruel. They'd try harder, like treating me with basic human dignity was an effort they'd make for Julian's sake, not because it was the right thing to do. Did you tell your mother that handing me dirty dishes was inappropriate? I explained that it made you uncomfortable. Did you tell your sister that mocking my education was hurtful? I asked her to be more sensitive. Did you tell your father that suggesting I need etiquette classes was insulting? He didn't mean it like that. How did he mean it, Julian? You didn't actually confront them, did you? You asked them nicely to maybe possibly consider being slightly less obviously contemptuous of me. And they agreed to try. How generous of everyone. What do you want me to do? Disown my family? I want you to stand up for me. Really stand up for me. Not ask permission for them to treat me like a human being. I did stand up for you. No, you negotiated. There's a difference. He pulled his hand back. Nothing I do is good enough for you. You're right. Basic decency isn't enough. It's the bare minimum. It's where we should have started, not where we should be celebrating arriving. So what now? We're done? You're just giving up? I looked at him across the table. This man I'd thought I loved. This man who'd let his family humiliate me and called it being protective. This man who thought love meant asking me to accept less than I deserved. I'm not giving up, I said quietly. I'm finally understanding what I'm worth. And it's more than this. This? You, your family. This whole dynamic where I'm expected to prove myself worthy while you're granted worth by birthright. That's not fair. You're right. It's not fair, but it's true. I stood up to leave. He grabbed my hand. Please don't go. Let me fix this. Give me another chance. Come to dinner this Sunday. Let me show you that things can be different. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no, to walk away, to block his number and never look back. But the part of me that had spent 3 weeks planning an acquisition strategy, the part that understood that revenge was a dish best served with proper documentation and legal backing, that part said yes. Okay, one more dinner, but Julian, this is your last chance. If your family treats me the same way, if you stay silent again, we're done. Permanently. I understand. I promise it'll be different. It better be. I left him sitting at that coffee shop, probably thinking he'd won me back. Probably congratulating himself on his persistence. He had no idea what he'd actually done. He'd given me access. One more dinner with his family. One more opportunity to observe, to document, to confirm what I already knew. That they'd never change, and neither would he. The timing was perfect. 2 days after I agreed to the dinner, Meridian Property Trust, LLC officially acquired the Ashworth family's mortgage note from their bank. The bank had been eager to sell. The Ashworths were 3 months behind on payments. The property was underwater. It was exactly the kind of bad debt that banks love to offload to private equity. We paid $3.1 million for debt with a face value of $4.2 million, a 26% discount, standard for distressed mortgages. The Ashworths received a formal letter from Meridian Property Trust the next day. It was polite, professional. It explained that their mortgage had been sold to a new lender. It offered them a simple choice. Sell the property to Meridian for $4.5 million, enough to clear all their debt and walk away with a small amount of cash, or face foreclosure proceedings in 90 days. The letter arrived on a Thursday. The dinner was scheduled for Sunday. Don't go anywhere because you won't want to miss this reveal. If you're enjoying the journey so far, hitting like is the best way to join the team. I imagined Dominic opening that letter. Imagined his face going white. Imagined Cordelia demanding to know how this happened. Imagine them scrambling to find a lawyer to understand their options to figure out how they'd gotten to this point. I imagined all of it while picking out my outfit for Sunday dinner. Something simple, nothing too expensive, exactly what they'd expect from the girl who didn't know which fork to use. Sunday arrived cold and gray, November in Connecticut. The kind of weather that made you grateful for central heating and old money, if you had both. The Ashworths had the heating. The money part was becoming questionable. Julian picked me up at 1 o'clock. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his tie, checking his phone, making small talk about nothing. He was worried about this dinner. Worried that his family would embarrass him again. Worried that I'd leave. He should have been worried about much bigger things. "Thank you for doing this," he said as we drove north. "I know it's asking a lot. It's just dinner. It's more than that. It's a chance for all of us. We'll see." My mother promised to be on her best behavior. Sienna won't be making any comments. Dad's been warned it's going to be different this time. "Okay," he looked at me. "You don't believe me." "I'm reserving judgment." "Fair enough." We drove in silence for a while. Then Julian said, "Something weird happened this week. My dad got a letter from some company about our house, about the mortgage." My heart rate stayed perfectly steady. I'd practice this. "What kind of letter?" "I don't know all the details. He's being cagey about it. But I think the bank sold our mortgage to an investment company or something. He's been on the phone with lawyers all week." "Is that bad?" "I'm not sure. He says it's just a routine business thing, but he seems stressed about it." "Maybe I shouldn't come today. If he's dealing with business issues—" No. He specifically said to still have you over. He said it would be a good distraction. "Please, Lena. We need this dinner to go well." "All right, if you're sure." We arrived at the estate at 2. The house looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago. Immaculate grounds. Perfect symmetry. The kind of place that announced its owners had arrived, even if that arrival was bought on credit and maintained through debt. Cordelia met us at the door. She was wearing what I'd come to recognize as her armor. Designer clothing, perfect makeup, jewelry that probably cost more than most people's cars. She looked at me and managed something that might have been a smile. "Lena, how lovely to see you again." Lovely. We were progressing from quaint. How touching. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Ashworth." "Please call me Cordelia. We're practically family, after all." We were absolutely not practically family, but I smiled and nodded. Dominic was in the living room, drink in hand, looking older than I remembered. Stress does that to people. Financial stress, especially. He shook my hand, and I noticed his palm was sweaty. "Lena, good to see you. Julian says you've been working hard." "Yes, sir. We just closed a major acquisition in Boston." "Ah, property management. Must be satisfying work." "It is." Sienna arrived 20 minutes later without Blake. "He's in Singapore for work," she explained, which I suspected was code for, "Our marriage is falling apart, but we're maintaining appearances." Aunt Petra arrived last, which she probably did deliberately. She hugged me warmly, which seemed to surprise Cordelia. "It's good to see you again, Lena. I was hoping you'd be back." "Thank you, Aunt Petra." We moved to the dining room. I noticed they'd seated me differently this time. Not at the far end near the kitchen, closer to the middle, next to Julian. A symbolic gesture. How progressive. Dinner started civilly enough. Cordelia asked about my work in a tone that suggested genuine interest, though I suspected Julian had coached her. Sienna talked about a charity event she was planning. Dominic discussed a new project the firm had landed. Everyone was performing normalcy, but I could see the cracks. The way Dominic kept checking his phone, the way Cordelia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, the way Sienna seemed distracted, absent. This family was under stress, and they were working very hard to hide it. We made it through the appetizer and the salad without incident. Then, during the main course, Dominic's phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "I need to take this, excuse me." He left the table. Through the open door, I could hear fragments of his conversation in the hallway. "I understand that, but 90 days isn't enough time. We need to negotiate. Who the hell is Meridian Property Trust anyway? 4.5 million is insultingly low." Cordelia's fork clattered against her plate. She stood abruptly. Excuse me, I need to speak with my husband. She swept out of the dining room. Sienna looked confused. What's going on? Julian looked uncomfortable. Dad's dealing with some business thing. It's fine. It was absolutely not fine, but I kept eating my chicken and pretending not to hear Cordelia's raised voice from the hallway. Aunt Petra caught my eye across the table. She knew something was happening. She just didn't know what yet. Dominic and Cordelia returned after 10 minutes. Both were trying to maintain composure, but failing. Cordelia's lipstick was slightly smudged like she'd been biting her lip. Dominic's tie was loosened. I apologize, Dominic said, sitting back down. Business issues, you know how it is. Everything all right, Dad? Julian asked. Fine, everything's fine. Just some complications with a property transaction. This property? Sienna asked. It's nothing to worry about. But it clearly was something to worry about, and everyone at the table knew it. Cordelia tried to restart the conversation. So, Lena, Julian mentioned you closed a big deal recently. That must be exciting. It was a historic property in Boston. It had been mismanaged for years. What happens to a property like that? Do you renovate it? Usually, we acquire distressed properties, fix them up, and either sell or hold them depending on the market. Distressed properties, Dominic said slowly. What does that mean exactly? Properties where the owners are over-leveraged, where the debt exceeds the value, where they can't keep up with payments. And you buy these properties? We buy the debt usually, then offer the owners a choice. Sell to us at a fair price or face foreclosure. The table went very quiet. That sounds predatory, Cordelia said. It's actually helping. We're offering them a way out that avoids public foreclosure. They get to walk away with some dignity and some cash. We get a property we can fix and return to productive use. But you're profiting from their misfortune. We're providing a solution to a problem they created. If they'd managed their finances better, they wouldn't be in that position. I saw Cordelia's jaw tighten. The rest of dinner was tense. Cordelia kept making pointed comments about vulture companies that prey on families. Dominic kept checking his phone. Sienna seemed to realize something serious was happening, but couldn't figure out what. Only Aunt Petra seemed relaxed. She kept watching me with this knowing look, like she'd figured out part of the puzzle and was enjoying watching everyone else scramble. After dinner, Cordelia suggested we move to the sitting room for coffee and dessert. But before we could relocate, Dominic's phone rang again. This time, he didn't leave the room. He answered right there. Ashworth speaking. Yes, I received your message. I've discussed this with my attorney and we're not accepting that offer. It's unconscionable. This house is worth $7 million and you're offering 4.5. No. No, I don't care what your appraisal says. I've owned this property for 22 years. I know what it's worth. He listened for a moment, his face getting redder. Foreclose then. Do it. We'll fight you in court. We'll tie this up for years. You'll get nothing. He hung up, threw his phone on the table. It bounced and skidded to a stop in front of me. Vultures, Piat, he said. Exactly what you were describing, Lena. Some company bought our mortgage and now they're trying to steal our home. What company? Julian asked. Meridian Property Trust. Nobody's ever heard of them. They won't even meet in person. Just letters and phone calls from lawyers. Can they do that? Sienna asked. Just buy your mortgage without permission? Apparently. The bank sold them the note. Now they claim we're in default and they want to buy the property for pennies on the dollar. How much do you owe? Julian asked. That's not relevant. Dad, if you're in trouble, I want to help. We're not in trouble. We're being targeted by predators. Cordelia stood up. This is not appropriate dinner conversation. We have a guest. She looked at me pointedly. I don't mind. I said, this is what I do for a living. Maybe I can help. Help how? Dominic asked. Well, what did they offer you? 4.5 million for a house worth 7. What do you owe across all mortgages? Dominic hesitated. That's private. I'm just trying to understand the situation. If you owe, say, 4 million, then 4.5 might actually be fair. It covers your debt and gives you something to walk away with. We owe more than that, Cordelia said sharply. and the house is worth significantly more. Is it, though? The market for estates this size has been soft since COVID. Most properties over 10,000 square feet sit on the market for years. And if you're carrying multiple mortgages, the carrying costs alone would eat up any appreciation. This house has been in our family for decades, Cordelia said. 22 years, Aunt Petra corrected. You bought it in 2002. Let's not rewrite history, Cordelia. Whose side are you on? Cordelia snapped. Reality's Cordelia. Side. Which is a side you've been avoiding for quite some time. This is not the time. It's exactly the time. Your house is over-leveraged, your business is failing, and instead of dealing with it, you're hosting dinner parties and pretending everything is fine. How dare you? I dare because someone needs to tell the truth around here. The room erupted, Cordelia yelling at Petra, Dominic defending Cordelia, Sienna demanding someone explain what was happening, Julian trying to calm everyone down. I sat quietly watching the family implode. Finally, Julian turned to me. Lena, you work in this field. Is there anything they can do? Any way to fight this? Everyone stopped arguing and looked at me. Fight what exactly? A company that purchased their mortgage legally and is offering them a fair price to avoid foreclosure? Fair? $4.5 million is not fair, Dominic said. What's the house actually worth? Not what you wish it was worth. What would it actually sell for in today's market? You listed it 8 months ago, I continued, for $6.9 million. You pulled it after 2 weeks because the only offer you got was $600,000. That should tell you something about the real market value. How do you know about that? Cordelia asked slowly. Property listings are public record. Anyone can look them up. Why would you look up our property? I review properties in the Northeast Corridor as part of my job. Greenwich Estates have been on my radar for years. Your job, Dominic said, managing apartment buildings. I never said I managed apartment buildings. I said I worked in property management, which I do. What's the difference? Sienna asked. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, turned it so they could see my signature. Lena Kovich, Sr., Vice President of Acquisitions, Apex Holdings. I acquire distressed properties for a private equity firm. Last year, I managed $340 million in real estate transactions. My base salary is $680,000. I have an MBA from Wharton, and I've been in this industry for 12 years. The room went completely silent. Julian stared at me. You never told me. You never asked. You assumed I managed apartment complexes. I let you assume. Why? Because I wanted to see if you'd value me without knowing my net worth. Turns out you didn't. Cordelia found her voice. This is absurd. You've been lying to us for months. I haven't lied about anything. I answered every question honestly. I just didn't volunteer information you never bothered to ask for. You were so busy judging me for where I came from that you never wondered where I was going. This is manipulation, Cordelia said. No. Manipulation is handing a dinner guest dirty dishes to see if she'll accept being treated like staff. Manipulation is coaching your son to date women from good families while treating anyone who doesn't meet your standards like garbage. Manipulation is building your entire identity on wealth you don't actually have while looking down on people who earned everything they have. Get out, Cordelia said. Gladly. But first, let me tell you something about Meridian Property Trust. We don't want to hear anything from you. You should, because I know exactly who they are. I know their acquisition strategy. I know their timeline. And I know that fighting them is pointless. You can't know that, Dominic said. I can, because Meridian Property Trust is my company. I'm the trustee. I own your mortgage. And I've been offering you a fair price to avoid foreclosure. The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the antique grandfather clock in the corner, ticking away seconds that felt like hours. Then everything happened at once. Cordelia screamed. Actually screamed. Not words, just a sound of pure fury. Dominic stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. You targeted us. You deliberately targeted my family. No, I said calmly. I reviewed your property 2 years ago, long before I met Julian. Your house has been on my company's radar because it fits our acquisition criteria. Over-leveraged luxury properties in prime locations. Meeting your son was coincidence. Falling in love with him was real. Watching all of you treat me like I was worthless while simultaneously drowning in debt you couldn't manage, that was educational. You did this for revenge, Sienna said. This whole thing was about revenge? No, this whole thing was about business. The revenge part is just a bonus. You can't do this, Julian said. His voice was shaking. You can't take our home. I'm not taking anything. I'm offering to buy it for more than it's worth given your debt load. 4.5 million covers all your mortgages and leaves you with $300,000. That's more than fair. Fair, Cordelia's voice was shrill. You manipulated my son. You infiltrated our family. You've been planning this for months. I've been planning to protect myself for months. There's a difference. You spent 6 months making me feel small, making me feel worthless, treating me like hired help, and I documented all of it. I pulled out my phone again, opened my photo folder, showed them screenshots of the family group chat Sienna had created. Julian's Little Project, it was called. Dozens of messages mocking me, photos of my mistakes, comments about my background, my education, my clothing. Did you think I didn't know about this? That someone wouldn't eventually tell me? You treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was too stupid to notice how you really felt. I swiped to another folder. This is every email Cordelia sent correcting my grammar, every text from Sienna about my inappropriate outfit choices, every voicemail from Dominic explaining what I should learn if I wanted to be taken seriously. I looked at Julian. And this is every time you saw it happening and said nothing. Every dinner where you let your mother hand me dishes. Every conversation where you let your father patronize me. Every moment you chose them over me. Lena, I didn't know you were keeping track of all this, Julian said. That's the problem. You didn't think I was smart enough to document my own humiliation. You underestimated me. All of you did. This is blackmail, Dominic said. No, this is evidence. Evidence that you've spent months treating me with contempt while I was falling in love with your son. Evidence that when I tried to talk to Julian about it, he called me sensitive and dramatic. Evidence that this family values appearance over substance, pedigree over character, and inherited wealth over earned success. None of that gives you the right to steal our home, Cordelia said. I'm not stealing anything. I'm offering to purchase a property you can no longer afford. That's business. Legal, ethical, standard business. We'll sue you, Dominic said. We'll take this to court. We'll prove you had malicious intent. Go ahead. Discovery will be fun. We'll get to review all your financial records. Every gambling debt, every secret loan, every shortcut you took on construction projects, every bit of fraud you committed to maintain this lifestyle. Dominic went white. What are you talking about? I looked at Aunt Petra. She was smiling slightly, proud. Aunt Petra gave me some interesting documents. Records she kept from when she still had access to family information. Proof of Dominic's gambling losses. Evidence of money taken from Cordelia's family, trust without permission. Documentation of construction shortcuts on past projects that could expose the firm to significant liability. You wouldn't, Dominic said. I won't have to. If you fight this foreclosure in court, all of this becomes relevant. All of it becomes public record. You'll lose the house anyway, plus your reputation, plus potentially your professional license. Or you can take my offer, walk away with some dignity and some cash and start over somewhere smaller. This is monstrous, Cordelia said. This is consequences. You spent months teaching me that people like me don't belong in places like this. That I should know my place. That I should be grateful for scraps from your table. Well, I learned the lesson, just not the one you intended. I stood up, put my phone back in my purse, looked at Julian one last time. I did love you, that part was real. I wanted to build a life with you, but you taught me that you'll never choose me over them. You'll never stand up to them. You'll never be the man I thought you were. and I deserve better than that. Lena, please. The offer stands. 4.5 million. You have 30 days to decide. After that, I proceed with foreclosure and buy the property at auction for significantly less. Your choice. I looked at Cordelia. Thank you for the dinner. Lessons. Thank you for teaching me about fine crystal and proper forks and knowing one's place. I'll think of you every time I renovate a kitchen in one of my properties. Maybe I'll even paint it sage green. I looked at Sienna. Thank you for the group chat. It was actually helpful documentation for my records. I looked at Dominic. Thank you for the business advice. You were right about one thing. There's a difference between property management and creating real value. I just don't think you understood which side of that equation you're on. And finally, I looked at Aunt Petra. Thank you for the warning and for the records. You were right about everything. Petra smiled. You're welcome, dear. I'm glad at least one of us got out with her dignity intact. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear the family erupting, yelling, blaming, fragmenting. Julian caught up with me in the foyer. Lena, wait, please. We can fix this. I'll get the money somehow. I'll make this right. I turned to look at him. How, Julian? How will you fix this? Will you stand up to your mother? Will you choose me over your inheritance? Will you acknowledge that your family's treatment of me was cruel and wrong? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's what I thought. I walked out into the cold November evening, got in my car, drove away from the Ashworth estate for the last time as a guest. Behind me, through the lit windows, I could see the family gathering in the foyer, arguing, pointing. Cordelia was crying. Dominic was on his phone. Sienna was yelling. Julian was standing in the doorway watching my taillights disappear. And Aunt Petra was calmly putting on her coat, preparing to leave the chaos she'd helped create. I called Yuki from the car. How'd it go? About as expected. They're furious. Cordelia called me monstrous. Dominic threatened to sue. Julian tried to get me to stay. And I left. I told them they have 30 days to accept the offer or face foreclosure. Do you think they'll take it? They don't have a choice. If they fight, they lose everything. If they accept, they at least walk away with something. How do you feel? I thought about it. Expected to feel triumphant. Expected to feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. I feel like I just closed a business deal. A profitable one. With some personal satisfaction attached. That's very corporate of you. I learned from the best. So what happens now? Now we wait. They'll scramble. They'll try to find alternative financing. They'll fail. And in 30 days, they'll sign the papers and walk away. And Julian? Julian will learn the most expensive lesson of his life, that silence is a choice, and choices have consequences. The Ashworths tried everything over the next 30 days. Dominic contacted every bank in Connecticut looking for refinancing. All of them declined. The property was too underwater, and the architecture firm's declining revenue made him a credit risk. Cordelia reached out to her family trust, begging for a loan. They refused. Apparently, they'd already lent the Ashworths money twice before, money that had never been repaid. Sienna tried to organize her wealthy friends into some kind of investment consortium to buy the house. Nobody was interested. 12,000 square foot estates in Connecticut weren't exactly hot commodities. Julian called me 47 times. I answered once. We need to talk, he said. I think we've said everything. Lena, please, you've made your point. You've shown us you're successful and powerful, and we underestimated you. We get it. Can we please figure out a way to make this right? Make what right, Julian? Your family's cruelty? Your silence? The fact that you only want to fight for me now that you understand what I'm worth financially? That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it is just. How is taking our home just? I'm not taking your home. I'm offering to buy a property you can't afford. That's business. If you want to talk about justice, let's talk about your mother handing me dishes at dinner. Let's talk about your sister creating a group chat to mock me. Let's talk about your father suggesting I needed etiquette lessons. Let's talk about you sitting there through all of it and saying nothing. I didn't know it was that bad. You knew. You just didn't care enough to stop it. I care about you. You care about the idea of me. The version of me that would shrink myself to fit into your world. The version that would accept being diminished because you asked nicely. But that's not who I am. And honestly, Julian, I don't think you ever really knew who I was. So this is it? You're just going to take everything and walk away? I'm taking what's mine. The house is a business transaction. The satisfaction is personal. And yes, I'm walking away. Because I deserve someone who stands up for me, who chooses me, who sees my worth without needing to see my bank statements first. He was quiet for a long moment. I did love you. Maybe, but not enough. Not in the ways that matter. I hung up. Aunt Petra called me the next day. I wanted you to know I've cut ties with them completely. Told Dominic and Cordelia that I'm done watching them destroy themselves and everyone around them. I'm sorry you lost your family over this. Oh, honey, I lost them years ago. I just finally accepted it. And you know what? I feel lighter. Free. My husband and I are planning a trip to Croatia. We've always wanted to see where your grandmother came from. She would have liked that. She would have liked you. You remind me of the stories she used to tell. About surviving. About building something from nothing. About never letting people make you feel small. She taught me everything important. She taught you well. On day 29, Dominic's lawyer called my lawyer. They were ready to accept the offer. 4.5 million closing in. 2 weeks. The paperwork was signed on a cold Tuesday in December. The Ashworths didn't attend the closing. They sent their lawyer with power of attorney. Professional, impersonal. Exactly how I wanted it. I wired $4.5 million to their account. They wired the property deed to mine. Business concluded. I drove to the house 3 days later. It was empty. The Ashworths had moved out over the weekend, taken everything that wasn't nailed down, left scuff marks on the floors and nail holes in the walls where their precious oil paintings had hung. I walked through the rooms. The dining room where Cordelia had handed me champagne flutes, the kitchen where I'd washed dishes with Aunt Petra, the sitting room where I'd been lectured about etiquette and breeding and knowing my place. The house felt different, empty, smaller, less intimidating. Without the furniture and the portraits and the atmosphere of inherited superiority, it was just a building. Just walls and floors and windows. Nothing special, nothing worth destroying yourself to keep. I called the project manager I'd hired to oversee the renovation. It's worse than the photos suggested, he said, walking through with me. The roof needs work. The HVAC is original from the 1980s. The kitchen and bathrooms are dated. We're looking at about $800,000 in renovations to bring it up to modern luxury standards. Do it. Full renovation. I want it perfect. Timeline? 9 months. I want it on the market by next fall. Over the next 9 months, I watched the house transform. New roof, new systems, completely redone kitchen with marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, bathrooms turned into spas, fresh paint throughout, landscaping upgraded, pool house renovated into a guest suite. By September, the house I'd first visited as Julian's nervous girlfriend had become something entirely different. Brighter, more open, more welcoming, more honest about what it was. A beautiful house, not a monument to inherited superiority. We listed it for $7.8 million. It sold in 6 weeks for $7.2 million. Total investment, $3.1 million for the debt, $4.5 million paid to the Ashworths, $800,000 in renovations, $8.4 million total. Sale price, $7.2 million. Wait, that's a loss, right? Except I'd structured the deal through Apex Holdings. We'd taken a mortgage on the property during renovation at favorable terms. The actual cash investment was only about $2.3 million. So on that investment, with the sale proceeds and after all costs, we netted about $2.1 million in profit. Return on investment, 91% in 14 months. My bonus, $340,000. I donated $100,000 to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from working-class families. The kind of students who might go to schools like Queens College and work their way up. The kind of students who know exactly what things cost. 6 months after the house sold, I was in my new penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows, view of Central Park. Twice the space of my old place and a tenth of the memories. Yuki was helping me hang art on the walls. You know what I just realized? She said. You could have destroyed them worse. You could have foreclosed immediately, could have exposed all of Dominic's fraud publicly, could have really buried them. I know. But you didn't. You gave them a way out, gave them enough money to start over somewhere else. I gave them exactly what they gave me, a chance to prove their worth. They failed. That's not my fault. Do you ever think about them? I considered the question. Sometimes. Mostly I think about who I was when I met them. The version of me who thought fitting in mattered more than standing up. The version who believed love meant accepting less. The version who'd shrink herself to make someone else comfortable. And I'm glad I left her behind. She was exhausting to maintain. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me look. It was Aunt Petra. Thought you'd want to know. The Ashworths moved to a 4-bedroom house in a less prestigious town. Dominic closed the architecture firm last month. Took a job at someone else's practice. Cordelia quit all her clubs. Calls it a temporary downsizing. Julian is dating someone his mother approved of. Old money. Right family. She treats him the way he let his family treat you. Funny how that works. P.S. Croatia was beautiful. Your grandmother's village still stands. The people there remember the Kovic family. Said your grandmother was the smartest woman who ever left. Sounds familiar. Take care of yourself, Lena. You earned everything you have. I set down my phone and looked out at the city. The city I'd conquered. The city where I'd built a career. And a life and a reputation on nothing but hard work and intelligence. Yuki noticed my expression. Everything okay? Yeah, just an update from Aunt Petra. The Ashworths landed where they belong. And Julian is repeating the same patterns. Do you regret any of it? The relationship? Yes. Falling for someone who couldn't see my worth. Wasting 6 months trying to fit into a world that didn't want me, that I regret. And the rest? The acquisition, the renovation, watching them face consequences? No, that I don't regret at all. They taught me a valuable lesson. What lesson? That being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it. If you document everything, stay patient and wait for the right moment. Being underestimated becomes the most powerful advantage you can have. That's very corporate villain of you. I prefer to think of it as corporate justice. Same thing, really. We finished hanging the art. A collection of pieces I'd chosen myself. No inherited. Portraits. No ancestors who'd judge my descendants. Just art I loved, in a space I owned, in a life I'd built. That evening, after Yuki left, I stood at my window watching the sunset over Central Park. Somewhere in Connecticut, the Ashworths were probably having dinner in their smaller house. Probably still talking about how they'd been victimized by a predatory company. Probably still not understanding that their cruelty created the circumstances of their downfall. Julian was probably with his new girlfriend, the one with the right last name and the correct pedigree, letting her be diminished the same way he'd let me be diminished. Because that's who he was. That's who he'd always been. I'd just been too hopeful to see it. My grandmother used to say, "You can't change people, Lena. You can only decide whether you'll accept who they are or walk away. The brave ones walk away." I walked away. And in walking away, I became something his family never expected, successful on my own. Terms powerful in my own right, worthy by my own definition. The Ashworth estate sold to a tech executive who worked in artificial intelligence. Someone who'd built something from nothing. Someone who earned what he had. Someone who understood that real worth isn't inherited, it's created. I heard through the real estate network that he loved the renovation. Said the house finally felt honest. Finally felt like a home instead of a museum to someone else's legacy. That felt right somehow. The house had become what I'd become. Free from the weight of other people's expectations. Free to be exactly what it was meant to be. My phone rang. My mother. She called every Sunday without fail. Had since my father died. It was our ritual. How's my successful daughter? Good, Mom. Just finished settling into the new place. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Mila. Everything you've built, everything you've become. I learned from the best. Your grandmother taught you to be smart, but you taught yourself to be strong. That's all you, Lena. We talked for an hour about nothing important, about everything important, about the life she'd given me by working her fingers to the bone cleaning other people's houses so I could go to college, about the legacy of strength she'd inherited from her mother and passed to me. After we hung up, I opened a bottle of wine. Expensive wine. The kind the Ashworths used to serve at their dinner parties. The kind I could now afford by the case. I poured a glass and raised it to my reflection in the window. To being underestimated, I said to the empty room. May it always work in my favor. The city lights sparkled below me. Millions of stories. Millions of people fighting their own battles, building their own lives, earning their own worth. I was one of them. Just one more person who decided that other people's definitions of value didn't apply. Just one more person who'd turned humiliation into fuel and betrayal into motivation. Just one more person who'd learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's success. Living well, building something they can never touch, becoming someone they can never diminish. The Ashworths thought they were teaching me my place. Instead, they taught me my power. And that was the greatest gift they could have given me, though they'd never understand that. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind one last time. Never let them see you coming, Mila. And when they finally understand what you are, make sure you're already gone. I was already gone, already building the next acquisition, already planning the next move, already becoming more than they ever imagined I could be. The girl who'd washed dishes in their kitchen was gone. The woman who stood in this penthouse had taken her place. Harder, smarter, richer, free. And they'd never see me coming again. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. More gripping. Stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. See you in the next one.